I love it. You get to problem solve, you get to build relationships, and you get to collaborate with a million different people who are incredibly smart and pull it all together to come out with a really cool product at the end of the day.
Awesome. And next we have Jen, who's a senior consultant with the Shelby Group.
Hi, everyone. So my day-to-day is, of course, a little bit different. I am currently operating as a project manager and design lead at the Shelby Group, where we design, implement, and integrate software solutions to transform and streamline operations departments for our clients. My day-to-day today is very different than it was a year ago, where I was at EY, and we were focusing on business transformation for more client-facing operations or departments. So sales, pricing, marketing, different kinds of strategy, blueprinting. What I have found is that within consulting, your days are pretty much comprised of a lot of meetings, and cranking out various different kinds of deliverables and making sure that whatever you're presenting to the client is, top notch and looks very, very nice. So my days are spent collaborating with my teammates, with my clients, and trying to address any problems that they see and come up with solutions. I'm here today because when I was early on in my career, I was not as familiar with what consulting was, and there weren't events targeted to women. So I'm happy to be here as a voice of someone who's been in the industry, who's tried different things, found my way to consulting, and share what I know.
Awesome. Next, we have Cristy, who's an insurance advisory executive at EPAM Systems.
The mouthful. Good evening. What does that actually mean? I accidentally fell into consulting, actually. Not knowing what to expect, I was kind of thrown into the deep end, if you will. And at that time, learning to figure out how to swim out of that deep end and really trying to establish myself as a woman in consulting field. My day-to-day varies. I wear multiple different hats. I lead a team that's executing on the ground client engagements, even from setting up transformation offices, program management, but also deal shaping and relationship management, which is on the side of, trying to do business development with your clients, understanding their industry, shaping, how you can solution for that client's business. And then also I'm in the midst of actually growing a advisory practice with our partners in the firm. So we wear multiple different hats. There's no one to sweep the floor. Guess what? We're sweeping the floor. So we have to get things done. And I often find that it's the women who gets things done. So I'm happy to be here and to share those experiences. And we hope that we have really good participation and lots of questions from the audience. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And then next we have Anita. She's a professional services consultant at AWS.
Hi. Thanks for having me here, first of all. So I fell into consulting through probably the area of problem solving. So I go back to EBSCO days as well, where I actually worked with Katy and Jackie and Brian and a few others, setting up one of their first analytics teams. And what we found while we were doing that was a lot of people needed what we did. So we kind of spun into almost an internal consulting team where we went from group to group to group going, what are you doing with your data? What do you need your data to do with you? And I really loved the idea of being able to meet a lot of people and find out what problems we could solve for them. And I went through a few iterations of different companies and different industries and got the call from AWS and jumped at the chance, because one of the things I was doing before in managing consulting was a lot of things around product. And one of the things I would tell people that I mentored was, if you get a chance to work for a company that develops a product that you love, go and work for that company, right? Because it doesn't come along very often. And I had launched multiple products on AWS, and I loved their technology. And I really was wanting to build that tech part of my repertoire. I had really good strength in business development, in building teams, and a lot of the business side. But that tech piece, I surrounded myself with a lot of smart people that knew the tech, but I wanted to be better at that. And what better opportunity to do it with a company like AWS. So a typical day in the life for me, I run large engagements for AWSI, which is our strategic industries group. So I deal with around 25 of our top global customers, anywhere from helping evolve deal quality to staffing and building the engagement, seeing through the deliverables. A lot of executive alignment sessions with our customers because sometimes they don't even know what type of problems they need to solve. So I get to work with some of the brightest technologists in the world to put our product together with what they need to do in the market. Excited to be here for a lot of the same reasons. I've seen a lot of young women come up in tech and not have the right resources or enough representation. And if I could have gone back and done it differently, I would have been in consulting from day one. So thank you.
Awesome. Yep. And then last but not least, we have Chitra. She's actually one of our fellow Cleartelligence team members. She's the practice director of data management at Cleartelligence.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And a day in my life, one day could vary from the next day because I participate in anywhere from engaging with the client, doing their proposals to see how we can help within the consulting organization, winning their projects, to some clients I'm just on an advisory role where we have foot on the ground team helping them, but I'm more on the advisory side. To, like all of them said, we wear multiple hats. So my day could be filled with that, and then night is roll up your sleeves and be coding away, right? So we all wear multiple hats, and I love the mix of strategic versus tactical, rescue projects, all of those things I do. I do manage a team, and I think I'm happy to be on this forum because I have been in consulting from day one, but out of 30 years, 20 years I've spent in consulting. So I think I can bring that good perspective of consulting versus non-consulting, how they are different, but still alike in what you bring to the table every day. Thank you for having me here.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much. So, lovely introduction for our panel. And then honestly, just for myself, before I jump right into the questions I have for them. So like I said, I'm the practice director of application development at Cleartelligence, which is, again, hilariously meandering from Latin and Greek, but I have a whole spiel about how learning to code and learning dead languages are basically the same skill set for anyone out there. But in terms of just my own day in the life, I also am sort of a hybrid role, actually, maybe even more so. So I manage a team, but I also do client delivery. So it's exciting. I was especially excited to find a place where I could do both of those things at once, right? So everywhere that I was at in industry, it was either find a way to go up in individual contributorship and usually hit a ceiling where they didn't know what to do with me after a certain point, or go into traditional management and have a team and lose all of that. And so I've really been excited, especially in sort of the boutique world and the rising, growing firm world, to be able to do both and to be able to actually still work on projects and have sort of revenue under management and all of that component of client relationship building and the pieces that I find really exciting. And also start to get to manage a team and do more of that I never would have thought I actually had interest in outside of this specific world. So that's a little of my own day in the life, and thanks for everybody. Okay, so we're going to jump right into all of the questions for them. So like I said, a huge goal for me in this whole thing was demystifying, right, the field of consulting. So I'd like to spend a little time first thing on just what we mean by consulting and how diverse that landscape can be before we dive into super specific topics. So like I said, in my early career and education, I had no idea what consulting meant outside of sort of very specific management consulting connotations, mostly gleaned from like pop culture, like think Office Space level of understanding of what management consulting meant. But as you can see from our panel here, consulting can range from that type of sort of C-suite level strategy and management consulting all the way down to hands-on technical implementation and sort of niche industry specific expertise. Like it's the full gamut, and sometimes you can do both at once, which is really exciting. And not only that, but within consulting firms, there's a wide range of roles, which is something else that this panel can really speak to as well. Some internal facing, more team management, branding, all of that, in support of the firm itself, and others external facing involving clients, and some a hybrid. I've often found that many consultants, especially women, end up in the field after becoming these de facto consultants, right? Sort of unofficial consultants in their industry jobs due to their innate problem solving abilities specifically, and often due to their ability to translate business requirements into technical documentation and a background in communication. And often a lot of these humanities hybrid backgrounds have contributed to all of that. So like I've said, that's certainly my path, and I'd love to hear from some of our panelists on their initial entrances into consulting. So for Nicole, you're up first. So you're a kindred spirit. I think everyone is almost, you heard them say they fell into consulting, and I swear every woman I talk to just about in the field tells me that they've fallen into consulting. But your kindred spirit in finding a meandering entrance into consulting after pivoting into more technical solutions focused role. How did you first get interested in or introduced to consulting as a career? And was the transition smooth or was there an adjustment period for you?
This was actually such a great question to reflect back on because it made me kind of retrace my journey to get to where I am. So, in right now, I live and breathe a lot of Salesforce. I live and breathe a lot of talking best practices, and translating individuals into them and companies into these practices, and building Salesforce to align with that. So take that the whole way back. My career started in nonprofit. I was a fundraiser at a nonprofit in Washington, D.C. And so I lived and breathed that. And I, dove head first in and learned the game, learned what I had to do to kind of build relationships in that space. And one of the core things that I did in that space was I managed corporate partnerships. So I was hopping around to all these different consulting firms, and that was my exposure. That was my first exposure. And I hadn't really stop to think back to that point, but it shifted my perspective because I hadn't had exposure previously to what that meant or what they did. And so as I built relationships, as I managed our board of directors and just those different relationships, it just started to change my mind to what that was and to put a face to the people in that space. And so that was like one progression of changing kind of what I was thinking and opening the door to consulting for me. And then that translated with my own journey within my nonprofit. I wasn't just doing fundraising. I became kind of the internal expert of our Salesforce instance, our technical instance, and I became the trainer and I became that internal consultant.
Yep.
I became the person solving those problems as they were coming up, to a point where I was hitting walls in both of those directions and started to think through, okay, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to pivot in? And so that all kind of led me to, hey, I think I want to kind of follow this trail of interest. And it started to open these doors more and more. And in an incredible space, there are consultants who work with nonprofits. And so I was able to leverage all of my knowledge that I gained from working in the nonprofit space to transition that into Salesforce consulting for nonprofits. And we've since expanded and gone in different directions. But the reason that they wanted me is because I had the nonprofit experience, the reason that door opened. And so I was able to speak to nonprofits and help to translate and tell that story of, hey, this solution can be a solution for you. This is, and let me like show you how that can work and let me bring you along the journey with that. So it became this, it's fantastic because it's project oriented, it changes, it's very fast paced, it's very challenging. And so it started to just check these boxes of who am I and how do I excel when I'm challenged, when I am able to connect and collaborate, when I'm able to build relationships. And it just kept aligning as far as like what could be a good fit for myself and how do I not only impact others and bring efficiencies to their world, but also kind of get fulfillment myself. And it kind of just all led together. So it's funny because there's a lot of terms that can be pulled into a consulting, but at the end of the day, it's someone externally kind of looking in and saying, hey, let me help you kind of figure out what you're trying to do and sort through some things to kind of help get you some efficiency, help, bridge a gap, whatever it is to get you to the next level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I also feel like the nonprofit thing is great because for me, a lot of it was, there's consulting for just about everything you can think of, right? If your undergraduate discipline was anything under the sun, there's probably some firm that needs someone who does something related to that, but it's not just discipline specific. Even something like the nonprofit world as a whole, right, is something that can be a transition and a pivot point into consulting. And whether there's entire firms that are dedicated to that or a small piece of a larger firm, there's just so many more opportunities, I feel like, within the consulting space to where your maybe unconventional background is, again, not just sort of useful, but coveted, right? They need the industry experts who can then translate everything that they need to the technical folks or to anyone else on the ground. So I think that's awesome. Cool. Wonderful. So sort of moving on from just initial entrances into the field, another big topic for me is education paths, right? It's how people got there once they are out is one topic, but the other for me was I never would have known during college to pick anything related to this eventual outcome, right? Outside of sort of the very official management consulting MBA route. So as a humanities kid, I've spent a large portion of my career in tech, dealing with varying degrees of imposter syndrome. I even wrote a blog about it for Cleartelligence. During COVID, though, I actually got the chance to watch my spouse finalize a full-time hybrid remote MBA program. So I got to sort of hear this in the background, and I'd see more of that than I would have expected otherwise. And I watched him go through the typical recruiting cycle to a major firm, which actually at the time caused me to rethink whether or not I felt I needed that official credentialing to continue to advance in my own consulting career. And so I really toyed with this for a long time. Okay, should I move to the next step? Went as far as starting to prep for the GMAT and some different things like that. And after some soul searching, though, I sort of settled on not pursuing an additional MBA degree on top of my existing MLIS degree for now, and just feel comfortable with my career trajectory forward. At least until maybe an eventual executive level, right? Like late stage MBA track that might make sense. But it was a topic that caused me significant anxiety and churn at the time during some transitional moments for myself in my own firm out of an individual contributorship role and into a leadership role at the firm. I really stopped and was just like, wait, can I officially do this? What I was already doing, it's the classic imposter syndrome. Can I stop and actually do this without the piece of paper that supposedly tells other people that I can do this at this stage? And so I'd like to just get a few different panelists' take on how their personal education backgrounds impacted their careers, if they'd have done anything differently, how they feel about the different programs, certifications. I mean, even within the MBA world, programs sort of run the gamut. There's all different types of sort of remote versus hybrid, especially post-COVID, large programs, small programs, very targeted programs. And then there's everyone else with, degrees like mine where information science, library science, those skills are highly coveted in the information tech world these days. So what is actually, there's no such thing as the right path, but what are some of the paths that could lead there, and how important are the different pieces of education credentialing along the way? So for Jen, actually, it's one of our, and this is kind of telling, right, as one of our only panelists with a traditional MBA, can you talk a little bit about the program that you attended, and how much do you feel that your education path impacted or influenced your career in consulting?
Sure, happy to. I actually just celebrated my 5-year MBA reunion a couple weeks ago, so we all got together. It was a lot of fun. I went to Babson, so I'm sure most people in this room know a lot about Babson, very focused on entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship. My path into Babson was somewhat unique. I had been working in the technology startup space, knew I was interested in entrepreneurship, or more along the lines of entrepreneurship. Kind of reached a ceiling, like many of the consultants here or individuals up here, where I wasn't being challenged with my day-to-day job. I was in sales. I was having the same conversation 50 times a day. Was trying to seek external opportunities where I essentially became a sole proprietor consultant working with startups, and was trying to figure out, what my path was and where I wanted to go. I'm very grateful for my experience at Babson. I did the blended learning program, which was partially on campus. It was partially remote. I think the ways that my Babson education directly impacts my successes within consulting surprised me today. It's not like I took a finance class and I'm taking, what I learned from that textbook and I'm applying it every single day. I think it's more along the lines of how you're taught to think. So in an MBA program, you're given frameworks, you're given tools, you're given different things to pull from to, dissect a problem in an organized fashion so that you can come to a conclusion or try to figure out how to resolve that problem for a client or an internal issue or whatever it may be. I think that how that was drilled into me within every single class that I took is something that, is second nature for how I go about addressing problems in my day-to-day. So it's not like I took one class and I'm quoting the book and yes, I have that skill set, but it's reframed and reshaped how I think. On top of that, every different consulting firm is going to have their own frameworks and their own tools. So having that, know-how and that confidence that I don't know the answer, because most likely at face value, you won't know the answer to solve a problem on day one when you are assigned to a project or, a client asks a question. But having that confidence that, I have the skills, the knowledge, I know where to go, I know who to pull, the resources, either people resources or tangible resources to figure that problem out. The second way that I think my MBA helped me in the business world or in the consulting world is it's largely focused on group work. So my undergraduate, I don't know how things have changed as far as curriculums are, and I might be aging myself, but my undergraduate was a while ago, and I remember everything was very individualized. So you're writing papers and you are taking tests. There was far less collaboration in my undergraduate program. Again, everything depends, right? But in your MBA, it's largely focused on group work, which is very similar to how you're operating at a consulting firm or in a consulting role. So on top of, gaining those communication skills, understanding you might not be great at something, but where to go and who to look for to either help you with that or say, hey, I'm really great at PowerPoint and I can make something look really beautiful. I'm struggling with the numbers. Can you help me? Or can you take on that responsibility so that we can work together to move forward? So I think it's more about how I work and the confidence that I bring with me day in and day out, not necessarily I'm great at my job because I have an MBA, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's great. And again, from my backseat MBA that I got to watch during COVID, there was still a ton of group work. And I remember being completely shocked at the amount of group work that was involved compared to both my own. You would think librarianship would have some of that, but it was still more individual contributor faced and focused. So at least in what I have seen, that's an interesting point that you bring that up as well. And then Anita, I wanted to come to you. So someone who's kind of gone back for more of that executive level education and credentialing later in your career, do you have any advice for students in our audience who might be trying to decide between pursuing an MBA or other advanced degree right out of school versus working a few years, figuring out what program or what type of fit might be good for you?
Yeah, thanks for that. So I'll come at this from someone who's hired a lot of MBAs and non-MBAs. It comes down to, and this is actually something I talk to anyone that I'm teaching something to. Education institutes provide you bodies of knowledge, right? And you can get those bodies of knowledge in a lot of different ways. What you choose to do with that knowledge and how you apply it is really what's going to set you apart, right? I remember when I was at EY, it was right out of university in Toronto. And one of the senior partners was like, do you want to help me start vetting resumes? He goes, here's a set of resumes. I got to interview these people. Order them in the person I should interview first. And I got it completely wrong. And what he taught me was the biggest thing that university teaches a lot of us is critical thinking, right? And that gets back to what you were talking about, right? The baseline of being able to solve a problem is critical thinking. And what he was interested is what were they doing outside of their core study? Because we worked for E&Y and he's like, we want to teach them our way because every firm has their own way of solving problems. They want to teach you those. He was interested in the people that had the broadest interests outside of their core business or core accounting or core finance studies. And I think from my years of hiring, I've seen the most successful people come in that haven't been on a very rigid track, but those of them who have had very diverse experiences outside of education. When I hire people, I want to get to know what you do outside of work because there's a lot of adjacent talent. So for people, I know in Canada, before you get an MBA, you actually have to work for 2 years in your requisite field, and then you can apply for an MBA. My wife teaches MBA students here where that's not a requirement. And it's very interesting for someone to try to get to an MBA level academics without no experience in the field. And I think what makes every consultant, every woman at this table and in this room fantastic is your experience, right? The more diverse your experience can be, go and do something different. Go and do something like living in Canada and working in finance. They encourage us, go do finance in the United States. They have like no regulations there. But it's like, go and do something different. And it's maybe adjacent to what you want to do, but don't be afraid of the fact that it's adjacent. Don't go, I got to go business. I got to do an MBA from these 4 schools, and then I'm going to do this thing for the rest of your life. There's so many cool things out there, to the point of even within an internal consulting firm, I didn't know AWS had consulting. a consultant I worked with told me, I was like, wait, that's a thing. It's so diverse. So I would say be diverse in what you're learning, because the different things you learn, especially at a bachelor's level, your really core learning is going to be critical thinking. When you get into that higher ed piece past your bachelor's degree, you really need a field to apply that knowledge when you learn it, because that knowledge that you're taking in is so deep. If you don't have application, you're going to lose the value. So it's really about those institutions and those people that can provide you knowledge. What you do with that knowledge is what's going to set you apart. And I think every single person, the best people that I've hired, I have a first hire list. Some of the people in the room, I've called you, where they're the first people I will always try to hire. And if you look at their backgrounds, they're extremely diverse. They have adjacent specialties. Kara's an incredible lacrosse coach. She's one of the first people I go to if I need a team leader at a company, right? Because she's a coach. And she has that adjacent learning, that adjacent discipline. So widen your perspective. Don't go into that narrow position, because the people with diversity in their experience are always the people that set themselves apart.
And I think another thing that I would add to this is don't be afraid to get out of your discipline. So I think for me, I was so, no, it was like humanities and librarianship and classics, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be an academic research librarian. And EBSCO was still in the field, right? Still adjacent. So even though I was doing all this tech stuff, it was still technically an academic publishing company. It fit. And I still remember, you'd think it would be, I started at EBSCO as an abstractor. So I was writing abstracts, like essentially summarizing journal articles that were, aggregated on the content. It was a content creation job. It was completely non-technical, right? You would think it would have been scarier for me to go from, at the start of my tenure, an abstracting content creation job to a full stack programmer, like writing my own full stack applications in Angular and PHP and doing all of my own database administration. You would think that would have been a scarier leap than basically doing that plus some data viz, either internal at EBSCO or external at a consulting firm. But by a mile, it was scarier for me to jump from EBSCO to the consulting firm, solely because it meant giving up what I was so convinced for so long was going to be my path. And it ended up opening so many more doors. And so I feel like it's a similar, but a big one for me, and sort of why I feel like this conversation is important is, maybe I'll get back to that one day. Maybe some of the contributions that I'm making in IT and tech now will eventually influence those worlds in the future, right? Or maybe that just was never meant to be my path, and be okay with stepping out. But I think on the route of, even if you've gotten a certain, set of credentials or thought that you were going to be in a certain realm, if it's not working, or if you want to just try something else, like, don't be afraid to close that door, because it's probably not permanently closed if you don't want it to be, and you might find other doors that you didn't even know existed.
Katie, can I
Yeah,
add something
please.
to that? I think another thing, so we've really kind of talked about the traditional education routes. I think another core thing with consulting that often is the case is there's non-traditional education routes that are very, very important, whether it's like certifications in certain types of technology, whatever it is. Like, there's a lot that you are potentially kind of looking to dive into that falls outside of just an MBA program. And that's where, like, being kind of cross trainable essentially is really, really core, because it might be, hey, we're going to go pivot and go into this industry, so go ramp up on this space.
AI emerging on
Or
the
we're
field.
gonna, we're gonna
get
go
certified.
start talking about this technology with our customers, go get certified in this technology. And so that all falls outside of a typical kind of MBA program or a business program or anything like that. It's just, are you able to just go over the weekend and learn something new, or spend some nights doing some of that stuff? So it's just like another piece with consulting. It's always continuous learning from that one.
And the credentials help with the imposter syndrome, right? So even if you feel like, I'll come back to that, but like, if you feel like you don't have the traditional path, well, most often these certifications are like proctored exams. If you can't demonstrate on that you can do it, people understand that you can do it. So I've also found, especially as someone who, even the programming and all of that, I didn't come from a computer science degree. I've thought about going back to get that in addition to but at the end of the day, if I can demonstrate that I can do these things and I can get certifications that can demonstrate the technical knowledge, why am I over here worrying about the fact that a piece of paper from 10 years ago says something different? So I think the certifications and the post, not just from a, you need to be able to pivot on the dime, but it also, I think, can be a bulwark if you're coming from a less traditional background into just helping yourself get over that hump of, I know how to do this, and I can show you that I know how to do this. Awesome. This was great. I think so. The next thing I want to focus on is work-life balance, right? And remote work, sort of a good transition into all of this. So even during the course of my own career in consulting, right, I've watched the landscape change drastically as the result of the remote work revolution brought on by COVID-19. Jobs that used to require daily or weekly on-site presence, essentially both travel, domestic and international, and grueling commutes can now be done from the convenience of a Zoom call. And as a parent, and at times during my career as a single parent, this has made a huge difference in what I feel my career growth track from this point might feasibly look like. And this topic isn't just relevant, right, to those with children or families or pets or, family members that they have caretaking responsibilities for, but it also has implications and safety concerns for women who might not have felt comfortable with extensive solo travel in sort of that road warrior phase, or even just local travel, even to, cities and other locations like that, especially in a male-dominated industry. So I want to focus next on some of our panelists' experience with work-life balance today and with past history of travel consulting, because we actually have a decent mix of people who did things before and after. And just for my own, so now I'm fully remote, but before I was a hybrid. So I was going on site into financial district 2 or 3 days a week, essentially for my client, and now have been fully remote pretty much since, except for awesome events like this. So I think, so Chitra, as a fellow parent, can you talk a little bit about what your work-life balance has looked like at various points in your consulting career, and in what ways has the remote work transition post-COVID impacted the balance?
Sure. Like I said, I've been doing consulting for a very long time. As luck would have it, through my phases of life where I was pregnant, I had 2 girls, and then now one is in college, one has started her first job. So I've seen the whole shebang. Yes, kicked them out of the door successfully, right? Made them productive citizens of this community, right? At least one so far. So I have seen it all. But work-life balance, first of all, if anybody is imagining work-life balance means it's equal hours of work and life. No, it's not. It's what you decide is fulfilling to you, and that gratifying, that satisfying feeling that you're not compromising on either one. That's the balance that you need to strike. Now, to strike that, I would say consulting, there have been certain compromises that I have made going through various stages of life, and between my partner, who is very hands-on parent, I consider that he's a very 100% hands-on. I don't want to say I'm lucky to have him, because he is expected to contribute that, but even with that help that I had, with that support system that I had, I still did not take on consulting being a road warrior. Like those days I've looked at consulting jobs, the first thing I would reject is where it said 80% expected travel, the consulting firms. That's a compromise that I had to make. And when I was pregnant, I was trying to decide that I don't want to do consulting anymore. But I was in the state of Maine. How many companies are you going to find where you're going to find jobs, right? And I was headstrong about not working for the same company that my husband was in my lifetime. Those are the only 3 years that I had to compromise, because there was no other company. So consulting. But the point that I want to make is it's about a couple of things, work-life balance in consulting. One is you have to decide what type of consulting you want to do. And there's a full breadth and length of consulting that you can do. You have to decide what's optimal for your family life, right? Number 2 is time management. Because I knew I had to rush at 4 o'clock to go pick up my kid from the daycare, I have missed lunches, or I would say, hey, why don't we meet on a Saturday? Or I would arrange with my husband when he can take care of the pickup and the drop-offs. We have done all of that. Time management, so that. And then being in consulting, you have to be open about that communication with that client. And everybody knew that I would rush out of the door at 4 o'clock, but they will find me back again at 9 o'clock at night. But also there's a fine balance there too. You don't want to set an expectation with your client that you're available 24/7, because then you're constantly on the phone. And I'm talking even before the days of Teams app and all of these apps, right? So it is a happy balance between what you want to do and how transparent you want to be. Now, it so happened that I came into the non-consulting world when I had my second daughter. And that's where I say consulting or non-consulting. There are differences, but there are similarities no matter how we look at it, right? I wanted to see if I can try without leaving my daughter in the daycare or after school system. And my supervisor at that time was very supportive. And she used to remind me, your daughter's bus is going to be there at 3:30. You better leave at 3 o'clock. And I would be right behind the bus. I'm like, okay, you can drop her off. Otherwise, kindergartners, they wouldn't drop off, right? I've tried every single thing. And then I decided I cannot run at 3:30. That was too stressful for me. Then I settled into I'll come and pick up at 6 o'clock in the evening. And I would be the first one to drop off my child and last one to pick up. Didn't feel guilty about it. Again, like you talked about safety, right, for the family. There are compromises that I have made because I had a full-time job and it was a consulting job. So I wanted to make sure that my child was in a safe place. So I chose the traditional daycare system rather than the home care because that's what I felt comfortable with. And I couldn't be home and I needed to be consulting. So there are compromises that you will make along the way. What you compromise on is your personal choice and the support system that you have. And being an immigrant, I'd never had the luxury of saying, oh, my parents can take care of my child, or my child is sick, so they can take care of my child. So then the friends group comes together. And we had a system where, oh, the school, of course, the school has days off at the drop of the hat, right? Professional day, this day, that day, and every other day. Being in consulting, right? No kidding. We had a network where we had made sure that one parent was taking care between 3 or 4 families, and the kids would have fun because they were together. And the parents, between 3 families, we had 6 parents, so we had enough support system to take care during the spring break, winter break, all of these things. So the support system, time management, and communication, open communication, to me were the things that worked very well. And even now you'll find me back online at 8 o'clock at night.
Yeah, I no, it makes so much sense. And I feel like you also have to enforce your own boundaries. So, you know,
Yes.
it has been very, it's great. So my son's school, so he's in first grade. They start at 9:10, which is incredibly late, I feel like, for an elementary school. And he's a little bit too small for the bus for what we would need in our area. So my day starts usually at 9:30. So I work and adjusted sort of 9:30 to 5:30. If I have an early meeting, I'll book before care. But otherwise, I don't, right? I just take him if I can do it, and I adjust out. And I'm the 6 o'clock parent 5 minutes before the end of the aftercare. But it's been great. And so, you know, I feel like you just have to sort of make those adjustments and you know, it comes as it goes. And I also think it changes at different stages of your career. So during COVID, when we were home for 4 months and he was, 3.5 at the time, I took critical meetings during the day. I worked from like 8 to midnight after he went to bed and then sort of did it all again. But I've thought about it now, and I was in more of an individual contributor role. I could not do what I'm doing in my career right now had that happened at this moment. So regardless of a pandemic, I also just think it's important to note that, like, at different stages in your career, what that work-life balance is going to look like for your family, whatever the situation is, kids or any other thing, is going to change. But I have at least found there's usually flexibility for you to kind of carve out what matters to you within that, be it a later morning or coming back online in the evening and all of that.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the remote work that I did not touch upon. So consulting, what is different about consulting is you have to be always ready as compared to working in a non-consulting environment. And you adjust. What we have found, especially during COVID, I felt bad for people with younger kids, right? I was out of that stage where I didn't have to manage. But when my kids were much younger and I was in consulting, it was different because we always were on site, and working from home was a luxury. Like when the child was sick, then you work from home. That was challenging. But now what I find the difference between consulting and non-consulting and this remote work culture is that as a consultant, you always have to be camera ready. Because, and especially if you're a pure developer and doing the task given to you, that may be a little different. But as people with experience and wearing multiple hats, talking to different clients, we have clients who I have never seen their face. I don't know more than their name, what they look like, right? So they have a no camera culture, which works fine. But then if I'm on another meeting where they are on camera, then I have to be. So you have to be always ready and not get comfortable with
Yep.
no camera all day long.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to add there around the boundaries, what I ended up just so during COVID, it got crazy, right? I was always on. So I actually have absolutely no work things on my phone at all on a given basis. I ended up just fully taking it off. I download them as needed. So I still take calls, obviously, and things like that. But for a day like this, right, I'm on site. I downloaded Teams this morning and relogged in to all of my clients so that today, when I'm not at home, I can have access to that. But then the minute I'm done with it and I'm at home, it's off. No email, no anything. Just to try to like work from home, it's so hard, the boundaries blur. And that's what eventually, because otherwise I would, even turning notifications off was not enough for me. I would constantly check it and it needed to just go away. But I've still been able to be completely present for my clients. I just do it from the desk. And if I know I have to be out somewhere, I'll reinstall ad hoc at the time. So that's been, another way that's worked well for me. And before we move on from the work-life balance real quick, I just wanted to also go to Cristy here. So she's someone who participated in more of the traditional road warrior travel style consulting. And I just wanted to see if you could sort of talk a little bit about your experiences during that time. How did it impact, your feelings about remaining within consulting? And do you miss the travel days or any of the on-site consulting? Sort of just like get a taste for it, right? We've been talking about all this remote, but what about the road warrior that people think of?
So I think, 2020, when COVID hit, that was the transition point for a lot of the consulting companies as well, because they actually had to pivot to understand how remote work really can apply to a consulting industry. I kind of had a different experience too, Chitra, and maybe this is where I age myself because I started the old consulting way, where you are literally shipped off to every client engagement. And my work used to be Sunday night, evening, I would fly out so I could be ready in the client work site, 8 a.m., sharp. And then, fly back home, late after Thursday evenings. And then working from home or going to your, engage or your company's office on a Friday, then to work with your colleagues on that project. And then basically your only day off is, Saturday to really catch up on life. So I lived through that era and I did that for almost 10 years. And being young in consulting, I will tell you, the first couple of years, it felt glamorous. Why? Because you get to go to all these exotic places like Des Moines, Iowa, right? Or Nebraska somewhere, and you're like, whoa, why did I end up here? But seriously, I did get to experience the world. I had projects in Spain, projects in Australia, Switzerland. So you get to go to these wonderful places and you get to experience a lot of diverse cultures. And, at a young age, starting in consulting, I couldn't ask for anything more. You get to learn, expand your skills, you get to learn different cultures, you get to fly around. I was telling Emma, I think earlier today, if you ever saw the movie Up in the Air, the person that was literally me. I was global services, for a couple of years, and when I missed a flight, they would actually have somebody come right next to the plane, scoop me off, and then off to the next, plane. They would hold the runway, right? Because I've been flying so much and I've been traveling, so the perks are there. So I lived through that, but then I didn't have children, but I think maybe that's why they started to put me on these long-term international projects. You're a woman, you can get things done, but let's also like have you travel to these places because you have no other obligation. I'm like, hold up, I still have a life. I try to be that superwoman, and I try to ask, some of my senior leaders, I'm like, how do you do it? How can you be a mom, and how can you be a caregiver? How can you travel, and you're a partner? And I'm like, what's the secret? Because I can't be a superwoman. So it is tough, and it came to a point where I ended up just burning out. Right? I mean, as glamorous as it is, when you wake up in a city and you're like, where am I? And where do I need to go tomorrow? And just trying to keep track of things just got so heavy and burdensome. It never became fun anymore, right? So you kind of hit that pivot point. So I left consulting because I was also, I never saw my condo. I never saw my home. All I know is I could read off all the airport codes. That's the life, right? And rake up all these perks with, hotel points. But still, if you can't enjoy those hotel points to have a vacation, to have that, mindfulness or to self-care. It doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself. So I came from that and then went to 2020 hit. Clients were changing. They're trying to figure out how do we make consulting work, even with being remote. People started to figure things out. You had Zoom, you had Teams, and there was even better collaboration. And I think clients as well as consulting firms started to learn, hey, I think we struck something here. We don't have to pay for your travels. We don't have to pay for all of these expenses that are added to the fees that you charge us. And yet we can get all the work done. So, hey, why not? So that model has become, very efficient. And, if you're working with global clients, why not? Now you can all have collaboration, right? And kind of follow the sun method where, I've done my part. Now the next person over in Singapore or Hong Kong can pick it up and, and it's just become really efficient. Recently, though, some of these clients also realized like, maybe we need to go back to, this, we're starting to open up. We missed the human engagement. And they are starting to talk about, okay, let's go back to this, working model. I'm like, hold up, I adopted a dog. It's an 82-pound German Shepherd. She is not going to say, I'm happy going into a kennel every week. So, trying to find that work-life balance. And then I think it really varies by the company and the consulting firms that you choose to work with, because they themselves will have a culture. So, depending on what you need and how you find your satisfaction and where you want to grow your career, investigate those companies. And I'm thinking, are you hiring for Cleartelligence?
Talk to me
I really
about-
like the culture that you're setting here. But, that's, I think that's kind of the opposite extremes, right? So as the world starts to open up again and clients start to notice, hey, we really like hand whiteboarding on the board with you. We want you here. We're trying to figure out ways where we can take turns by, putting people so that I don't have to be there every single week, right? And I need to figure out how to grow a team that they can also be self-sufficient. That if I'm not there, someone else is leading, and we can switch and, take turns, because we're finding that, we can't burn people out. You get higher rates of engagement and productivity, by giving people some life back.
Yeah. And I think the takeaway for me is just, it's out there if you still want it, right? I also think people are scared that like that life is gone, right? And if you did want, you're young and you want to go and do that, there are still so many firms that are very happy to, fly you around. But, like Cristy was saying, I think there's a happy medium, there's a middle ground. I loved hybrid. I will still go on site for, specific meetings if there's local clients, things like that. I think that is kind of the wave of the future, like you said, is figuring out how people can go at different points and maybe you have higher engagement, lower engagement. But I think the biggest takeaway is just whatever situation you need, from fully remote to some kind of hybrid to part-time hybrid that changes, to I want to go and travel the world and have someone pick up the bill for it. It all still exists and can be found at more firms than you'd think and at different sizes than you think for all of those different opportunities.
I will sign up for any opportunity where you can work in your yoga pants and barefoot.
Zoom from the, waist up. But yeah, so then I think, as we just talked about, right, a lot of positive changes have occurred to allow women better access and flexibility through remote work and emerging technologies. But there's always still going to be elements of adversity to overcome in what has traditionally been a male-dominated field. The stigma many women still face over their involvement in STEM-focused industries, historically male careers, cutthroat style roles, still alive and real in many ways. However, there's also been an emerging set of allied voices that have helped break down walls where they might have otherwise stayed up. And it's important to shine a light on the best ways for women to advocate for themselves and to allow for others to successfully support them in this advocacy. And so for Anita, you've had a lot of experience in this in different capacities over the years. Has there ever been a situation of sort of direct discrimination or conflict you faced due to your gender identity or other gender stereotypes? How did you handle or overcome the situation? And how can other colleagues function as allies and provide support?
Yeah, that's a question we'll grapple with forever, right? I was actually really surprised. In the last 5 years this happened. I want to make it a little bit ambiguous. I was managing a team. We were working with a client. We were all based in the States and our client was in Europe. And there was this younger consultant on my team. She was quite brilliant. And the customer was being awful. In not just a customers can be tough kind of way, but aggressive and abusive. And they would particularly do this. We would localize our hours. So they were in Europe. We were, up at crazy hours. And I noticed this pattern that this person would do this specifically when this young consultant was in the room. And it made my blood boil. It still bothers me, right? And so I reach out to a portfolio lead and I said, listen, this is going on. You have to look at the macro and you have to look at the micro. Sure. But she's a human being and I don't like this. And if you don't say something, I'm going to say something and you probably don't want me to say something at this point. And so we pulled the team together and there's a sales lead that owns the relationship with the customer. And so I explained, like, we've been pouring hours. We're getting ready to go to Europe to do this multi-day huge thing. And we've been pouring hours into this. And I just see this young woman getting ground down by this client. And I'm just furious. And so I pulled the team together because we have to run our approach to quelling this behavior through the salesperson because they own the relationship. This salesperson was a female. And so I thought, she'll understand. So I get on the call, the entire team's there, male engineers, whatever. So there's a group, right? It wasn't just all women. And so I explained, because the young woman's so frustrated, she can't. She messaged me, she texted me, she's like, can you just walk her through this? Because I can't. And I'm like, I got you, don't worry about it. I tell the story, and I kid you not, the first words out of this woman's mouth was, welcome to life, welcome to consulting, you get paid well to deal with this. And it was one of the first times I've ever raised my voice at a colleague because it was a gut reaction. And I said, I'm going to end this call and we are going to convene in the morning. And I immediately got on the call with the young woman and I said, listen to me. I said, my job is to make this industry better for you. And I take that very seriously. Every single one of us at this table should own making this industry better for every one of you. And if we're not doing our job. And so I went back to that woman and I went back to a couple of leaders and I said, this is what happened. And I said, this is my problem. If we don't change the expectation on how our customers treat us, they won't change. Behavior and patterns persist because we allow them to. So you have to step in. I'm not saying lean in, I'm saying step into the middle of the room and it will scare the hell out of you. But you have to remember who's coming after you. And that was one of the hardest experiences because I've had brilliant, I'm working for a woman right now and she is brilliant and she has got my back. She will tear walls down to support me. And I've worked with strong women like that. I've worked with you and I've seen you come up with it. I've worked with you and seen you've come up with it. I've worked with you and seen you've come up with it. I've taken your lead from it and learned from it. So you'll experience, I've had a lot of different experiences. Interestingly, I've had a lot of support from the men that I work with. The boutique firm I was at before I came to AWS, it was like me and one chick, right? And they were awesome. Guys from Texas, guys from the Midwest, guys from the city, they were amazing to me. And I think it was because that firm had an incredible ability to build an insane brain bank. So it wasn't as competitive, right? I'm at where I am now, and all of the men that I've worked with have been really, really fantastic sponsors. I have a person right now that I'm working with where he's helping me through the promotion process. And he's like, I've got someone for you. Let me do the work. I'll call you next week. So there's been really good sides to it. But I think one of the most shocking sides to it was when I expected a female ally and man, was it off the mark. And I was angry for a long time, but it made me double down on that fact that we have a responsibility, and it may sound really kind of like soft and hand wavy, but we have a responsibility to push back on those behaviors and those stereotypical patterns because you guys are all coming next. And so where I work, we have a hiring practice where if you're not better than 50% of the people already doing the job, you don't get hired. And to me, if I'm not making this better to a degree for people coming behind me, I'm not doing my job.
And I think it's especially important to note in consulting, people get scared with the whole customer is always right mentality, right? I feel like it's so much more difficult sometimes to feel like it's appropriate to step in and police the client or anyone on those behaviors, because there's this extra layer of you don't work there. It's not like your HR that you're going to complain to in this particular instance if a client is being inappropriate, whatever their gender. But I think it's equally important to just have a firm that will stand behind you, and most have. Cleartelligence has always been great for that. And but also just to not be afraid, because to be honest, in the cases where I have done that and stood in front of people when a client was being inappropriate, the client has backed down and has changed often over time, and the relationship has grown further. Like, don't feel that you still need to do it respectfully and do it in a way don't just rage quit a meeting. I've almost rage quit a meeting before, but don't be afraid to try to push that change. It's not going to be the end of that relationship more often than not.
And I think too, really quick, sorry.
No, it's an important
I just
topic.
remembered as you were saying that, I was at a firm. So I'm good with confrontation, right? But if you're mean to me, I have this chink in my armor where like I'll cry. I'm sure it's childhood baggage. I don't know. But like, I can deal with aggressive. I can deal with type A's. I got to be the biggest voice. Okay, that's fine. You do you. But if you're mean to me, you do a personal attack, it really hits me hard. So I was on a client call, and this dude just came at me. And I stumbled back a couple steps. And again, I was the only woman on the team. All of my guys were blowing up my phone. We got your back, stick in there, take a deep breath, be apathetic. They were my cheerleaders, right? They were my hype guys in the back. They were like, don't worry, we'll sort him out after this. Just get through this call. You've got this. And so I've been on the receiving end of that, where I've then worked with professional coaches. I've just recently finished a stint with a professional coach where I was like, I gotta not cry when this happens, right? I'm 45 years old. Come on.
I don't know. Normalization of that. I've cried on multiple work
Yeah.
meetings, including one client meeting once, actually,
But
to
it's
be
just
honest.
like, if that happens to you, don't take a step back and go, I'm broken. I'm not made for consulting. Because you have a bloody seat at the table. But we can't be bulletproof. So when you find that that's a weakness in you, go after getting the tools. Compensating controls is a huge thing that I love to talk about clients to. You have a plan, you don't have everything. What's your compensating control? I needed to, having a great, wife, I was like, hey, gonna do some investment in myself. And I need to figure out, and I worked with a professional coach to get better tools. I'm not great at it, but I'm taking a step forward. So that's another huge thing too, is like, don't think that you're less than because you have this spot that someone can get to once in a while, but try to be prepared for it. Go ahead.
So I wanted to add to that. It's not even the clients for me. There have been 3 instances in my consulting life that I can remember. The last one in the last 5 years, I want to say, in consulting. The client was white American. I'm a consultant, and then there's another consultant. So these organizations can have multiple consulting companies do
often.
different work, right? This gentleman was just so aggressive in every single meeting. And then finally, this lady tells me, you know what I observe? I've seen this before. It's the Indian male-female conflict. These are things, and I'm saying this, that you will never, in your gut that that's what it is. You can never call it gender bias. You can never call it cultural bias, but it does happen. And all 3 times, it was an Indian male not taking it that I was assertive in my position. But in those situations, I've had to step in myself and not wait for somebody to back me up or somebody to voice it for me, right? It could be as simple as, what the hell is your problem, right? Let's talk about it, to you stay in your lane, let me stay in my lane, and let the client tell us what she wants, right? So, and these are things where the other person will probably be as knowledgeable as you are, but they come out aggressive, trying to shoot you down and telling you that you're not good enough. Now, like she said, it does take a moment to say that imposter syndrome that we all talk about, right? Maybe I don't know enough. maybe I'll do some more Google research and come up with my answers, right? But at some point, you got to be like, I know what I know, and nobody is going to walk all over me,
Yep.
right? Whether you call it a gender bias or not, you tell them, this is what I was asked, and this is what I'm doing. These are the answers. Prove me wrong otherwise, factually.
Yep.
Don't sit there and argue. So yes, I've had those type of situations, but in those situations, I had to step in myself. And all my the three experiences that I've had, I would say, is because of culture, that where I come from. And I would tell my husband, I can't even explain this to you because you'll never experience it. Me being an Indian woman, know what I'm seeing. So there's a lot of culture and bias.
I think something that I've heard from both of you that I think is really, really powerful is this not just taking that in, but instead doing something about that, whether I'm not internalizing it, but I'm going to escalate it, or I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something. I think like both of those are really core pieces, because that really then ties into how that impacts me as a professional and what I do in the future, right? Because it impacts my mentality. How do I handle the situations? We're going to have hard situations. So am I going to kind of compartmentalize what I need to, kind of toss that bit, because that was, I can kind of call it what it is. I'm going to move it over here and I'm going to push forward, or am I going to let that impact who I am and where I go and who I become? It's not, we're going to all do our part, right, to make it better. But at the end of the day, like everyone is going to have to deal with it in some different capacities. And the key piece for an individual is is not letting that change who you are, and instead choosing how to kind of use it to push you forward in whatever way, but not from an anger place or not from anything other than I'm going to not let it impact who I am, and I'm going to keep going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just wanted to add for everyone too, around just general timing. We started a little late. We're going to keep going. We have the room until 9. And so for any of the resume review slots, we'll just call your names in order. We'll adjust that afterwards, just in case anyone's starting to get close to any of that. Because I think all of these are super important topics. So try to finish this up essentially by 7 and get everyone some food and some networking. Okay. And then I had one last question actually on the gender, because I think this is a really important topic. So for Jen, you've kind of been at many different firms, right? The big firms, you've worked for yourself, you've kind of been all over. I'm curious, have you ever encountered the age-old, so been told to smile more, or encountered any of the sort of gender-specific expectations, right? Just across, like, and if so, where, and how did you respond? What advice would you give to people who might experience them themselves?
So I laugh at this question because I have no poker face at all. So if someone tells me to smile, most of the time, depending on who it's coming from, it might be constructive criticism. But in terms of, don't show your emotions, make sure you're in control. So what I've learned is, and I've seen everything. I've seen things in sales. I worked in sports directly out of college. If you want to talk about a male-dominated industry, I've been in those rooms. I've been in those really kind of toxic industries too. Devil Wears Prada-esque, I've seen things. What I've learned through maturity is control what you can control. You can only control your reaction. So there are times to raise a hand. There are times certainly where, if it's getting in the way of you having those at bats, if you're constantly being looked at as a female in a less than capacity, then, know who your network is, know who your allies are, figure out the channels for how to, address a situation if it gets to that point. I would say pause. Sometimes the reception of whatever the behavior might be, if it is just a colloquial, you should smile more or whatever, it might not be how you interpret it. So I think a lot of times people are very quick to pounce and raise a hand and say, I feel a certain way. It's really important to try to look at all components and say, maybe he didn't mean it that way. Maybe it's a 70-year-old partner and that's just kind of cultural for him. And, do you really want to confront that? On the other hand, if it is something to confront, sure, there are channels to address it, certainly in a controlled manner. I don't think I've ever and maybe I just didn't have confidence at that time. I don't think I've ever addressed something head on at the time that it's happened. I also have known that I've been the only female. I've also been the most junior person in the room. Didn't necessarily have that authoritative command to address it. I needed help. I might say something which might, or I'm going to say something which might sound a little bit controversial, but I would say, you know, outside of the if you're being treated differently because you're a female, and those can be negative experiences, I would say embrace being a female in business. You know, smiling, presenting yourself, showing up, make sure that your work is bulletproof, because, you know, people are going to look at where they can poke holes in what you're presenting, what you're providing. Make sure, and so when I say control what you can control that, you know, come prepared. But showing up in a room filled with men, or maybe, you know, not friendly women, and looking put together, smiling and being in command of that room, you have a superpower that most people in that room won't have. Or thinking about how to go the extra mile. And I'll keep this quick, I know.
No, you're
We're
good.
going long. But
It's important.
you know, I was leading a work stream for a global implementation project when I was at EY. I had direct lines of communication to every single executive person on that team. We had a marathon day of virtual presentations, but I think I spoke in front of something like 140 directors and above at the client site to try to advance our initiatives. So it was a long day. It was an exhausting day. You know, we could have just closed our computers at the end of the day and said, okay, thank goodness I can go watch whatever I was going to watch that night. I don't know if it was The Bachelor or whatever, and call it a day. But, and I don't know if this is because I'm female, but I said, you know what, we all worked really hard to get this done. I'm putting a 15-minute virtual cheers in everyone's calendar. All of the people who made this go forward. It was me, and I think there was one other female, and mostly men. That sounds very similar to getting coffee, right? I leaned into who I am, the skills that I have, and I went the extra way in something that could generally be perceived as female. But I saw that as an advantage, and that provided me with extra face time with the executive team, building that rapport and that relationship. So, you know, as much as I'd say I am going to support anyone who experiences adversity, but also say, figure out where being a female in business is going to help you.
No, absolutely. I think those are all great points. And the last thing I would add to that is, as someone who is, I don't know, described as passionate too many times in my day-to-day life, come as you are, right? Like, I think it doesn't mean that to be successful in a traditionally male-dominated industry, you have to adjust your style to be more harsh, right? There are ways you can be just as effective. If you are that great, go for it. Don't be afraid to be perceived in a certain way. But if you're not, you know, there's others, actually Jackie, who put together this lovely, I've often said she's so effective because she is the expert who is silent on so many meetings. And then when she speaks up, she has so much power, right? I'm the opposite. I'm the person who's talking for way too much of the meeting, and it works for me. But there's so many different ways to play into your strengths, and it doesn't mean that you have to conform. So just the last thought. And then, so actually a good transition, one of the best ways to arm yourself, right, against situations like some of the ones we just discussed, is to surround yourself with the best mentors that you possibly can, who can provide you with an empathetic sounding board and time-tested advice. For women especially, forging strong networks and bonds can be crucial both in the short and long-term career growth. And I would personally never be in the position I am without many such figures in my own life, including Anita. You know, so I wanted to ask some of the panelists, so I'm going to go to Cristy. How important are professional mentorships in your own career, and how have you typically sought them out or been sought out for these roles? Because I think people often, how do you get a mentor? What do you do if someone asks you about being in a mentoring relationship? Just what does that look like for you?
So when I was starting out, you know, very young in consultancy, I didn't really know about mentorship, right? And being an introvert myself, you know, I'm shy. I don't want to reach out to people. Like, do I really want to like reach out to this person and say, like, give me some advice, or, you know, be a mentor? But it was something that I needed to learn how to break out of my shell, only because in consultancy, it is somewhat still cutthroat, and it depends on, you know, which firm or organization you go to. But mentorship is so important because they can, you know, provide insights in terms of, you know, their own experiences, but also kind of help you understand, what works, what doesn't. They have to really know your strengths. And I think it's not just mentorship and seeking out a mentor. And it's also about coaching, but also what's important in consultancy is having your sponsor. So you'll know what that means as you go into consulting, as you grow into the ladders of, the consultancy, is somebody who can vouch for you. If you're not in the room, what would they say about you? It's really important, as you seek to kind of grow your career ladder in consultancy. And so where your mentor kind of is, your friend that you can grab coffee with, kind of explore, what has been your experience, or, you're kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. A coach is someone who can say, what, stop fidgeting, or smile more in a meeting, or, they can really give you some real hands-on and good coaching advice. Sponsor is someone, like I said, is you're not in the room. Are you really good? Are you good for that next level? So that sponsorship is important. Networking is even more important because you have to expand your sphere of influence, right? And you surround yourself with that positivity of like women and men in this room who can be your allies. And that networking can open other opportunities, right? So if someone in this room can say that they've had a wonderful straight trajectory in their career, great. But there's going to be ups and downs and pivots that you don't expect. And networking is a great way to, develop that relationship to say, hey, I'm kind of stuck, and they can open opportunities for you. They can open doors for you. They can, connect you with the right people so that you can have the right conversation. Just as, we were even, in this panel getting to know each other, our companies are going to work together. So how great is that? Just by saying hello and just networking, you kind of start to open other doors, right? For these relationships that are going to be very valuable. So, I would say, and the other thing is, for me, what I found most valuable was finding mentors and coaches who were in the industry, but also not in industry. Because you want that well-balanced outside perspective. And it's not just, pigeonholing yourself in this, but also it's important to have women and men, right? You've got different perspectives and they can all be different allies. So don't pigeonhole yourself, expand and network and get to know one another. And you'll find just the importance of those relationships as you grow in your career.
Absolutely. Yes. And hopefully people can network tonight and find, potential mentors, potential colleagues, all of that. Okay. So I'm going to pivot a little bit now actually with kind of our last 10 minutes or so into some of the more practical elements of what consulting looks like for women day to day during career advancement. You may be wondering how management roles differ in the consulting world from traditional industry style management. Although in industry, I literally vowed that I would never want to be a people manager. As I mentioned earlier, my own role has evolved into a hybrid position where I do have direct reports with career development and, team management responsibilities, but I also still run projects and perform project style leadership and all of that. Many of our panelists have experience up and down the management chain in various consulting roles and in industry, and provide some excellent insights on sort of the paths and the pros and cons of each of those. And so jumping to Nicole, actually, so you're you're a manager in your current role today, you manage a team. What different types of management roles have you encountered or held throughout your career in consulting, and how have they differed from your experience in industry, maybe in nonprofit different?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think within consulting, there's a little bit of a cross-training concept when it comes to management. So I've talked a lot about what I do, but I also manage a team that is my role. So I'm the business process consultant team lead. So I manage that whole team of what they do with our Salesforce practice. And so kind of breaking it apart on a project level, there's oversight of projects, and that comes from a couple of core individuals and perspectives. So, what is the vision of what we're doing? There's usually someone who's driving project manager, someone who kind of owns the project from that standpoint. And there's probably some sort of technical kind of oversight that happens. So that's project level management within our consulting space. And then there's lots of doers, individual contributors. There's another flip side. So that's kind of like the by project level. And then from the role level, we have different kind of management structures around that. And the big reason for that is, hey, we want to be standard. Like, I want to make sure my, business process consultant A has the same methods as business process consultant B. So I know that we're delivering the same level of effectiveness across different projects, and we're holding ourselves to that standard. So that's a space that you kind of see. You see project level expertise, and then you see this kind of role level kind of ownership in different spaces, and that rolls up. So there's a larger kind of advisory business advisory group that I'm under, and it just kind of hierarchical from there. You also see what Katy is, like a practice level. So you see, hey, from a leadership level of a practice, someone kind of owns that vision of that practice, and there's people underneath that. So there's different kind of tiers of how that all works. What I would say is this was the experience of what kind of my team is, and within consulting at at CDI, my company where I'm at, that varies by organization and by consulting firm. So I think you're going to probably see some semblance of those concepts, kind of leadership from a project standpoint typically, and then leadership from like a role standpoint, but it's going to vary within that from practice to practice and from consulting space to consulting space. They're both really important, right? Because one manages the expectations with what, with the customer and what is getting delivered and the quality. And the other side is making sure your resources are cared for, heard, and developed so that we can retain them and get everybody into a really cool spot that they're really excited about. So it's a fun little dance. And I think the other big thing with that is the value that comes when you see leadership invest in leaders is so important. So as you're looking for places, if you're networking and trying to find a place, that's a huge thing, is are those leaders held accountable for the teams that they're leading? And that's just like a surefire way to figure out, okay, am I going to be successful in this space, or am I going to be kind of get stuck in a role of sorts? So those would be my tidbits. It really varies, but
no, absolutely. And I think I'm gonna short pivot and combine two questions as we jump to the end, but it's super relevant, related to management and growth within an industry, but also hiring. One of the biggest draws of the consulting industry, right, can be compensation, be that salary and bonus or generous benefit packages or vacation. However, many women don't really feel empowered to negotiate on their own behalf during initial hiring conversations, or even vice versa, right, if they're the one doing the hiring. So I just want to spend a tiny bit of time here at the end talking about some strategies to help with these conversations and understand the full scope. So Anita, I'm going to come to you and kind of combine two questions. One, how do you approach salary negotiations, either for a net new job or someone you're hiring? And combine that with, you've built a lot of teams as a consultant. How have you approached team building, right? Talking about management as you've grown, and how does that tie into sort of this whole salary and compensation conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So the biggest thing with salary negotiation is do your homework, right? There's, sometimes you'll know someone at the firm and they'll be able to tell you, but there's applications out there, right? There's Fishbowl, there's a bunch of different areas where you can kind of take a look, do the homework to find out what you're worth, right? And a lot of what we've talked about is predicated on, it depends on where you are in your career. So it changes. Like when I was younger, Wendy and I were talking about this earlier, I'm 45 now. When I was in my 20s and someone would say, I would ask what the salary was, and they would say, well, let me tell you about total comp. And I'm like, I'm 20. I need money in my bank account. I don't really care what why are we talking about total comp? Now that I'm older and I moved here, from Canada, where we have socialized medicine, and I really very quickly realized what you have from a healthcare perspective. That became I'm like, I would like to talk about total comp. my time in my life has changed, and now this is very important. So, localize to where you are in your career, but also make the money. Don't be afraid. Like I'm in my prime earning years right now, and I'm asking for a lot of money, but I have the work to back it up, right? I have the portfolio to back it up. So do your homework, find out what you're worth, and then whatever you think you should ask for, put 20% on top, right? There's this old sales pitch of pitch 'em high. What can they say? No, I mean, some might actually hang up on you. I doubt it, but do a little bit. And this is where leaning in and being brave is really, really important, right? So do your homework, and whatever you think you should ask for, 20% more.
Because the
right?
men are doing it. That is what I have
men are
found,
doing it.
right? Like,
The men
it's
are doing
just
it.
true.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
but so from a hiring perspective, this is where, again, responsibility to our community is critical. I think a couple of people in this room have applied for jobs with me, and I've said, what is your salary expectation? Because I was old school and that's so wrong to do. And they gave me a number and I said, how about this much instead? And I was paying them $15,000 to $20,000 more. Now, as a leader, if you're positioning yourself to be a leader, make that space for yourself in your company. Go and work with your senior leadership and say, hey, listen, I'm not going to play games here. I'm not bringing someone in. It's not a win for us. This is your integrity play, right? It's not a win for us if we got someone for less than what we should pay them. Is that really what you want to be at the end of the day? Is that the firm you want to work for at the end of the day? We got him for 30,000 less. Some of the things that I think about when I make decisions like this, and this was help from the coach that I worked with, was when you're making a decision, ask yourself, is this moment going to matter in 10 minutes, 10 weeks, or 10 years? And when I deal with someone's career, how am I going to feel about this decision in 10 years always resonates with me. So when you're going in and you're negotiating salary from yourself, do your homework, put 20% on, be brave, just ask for it, make the money, you're worth it, you're going to work hard. When your manager, create space to make the integrity play and pay people what they're worth. You're going to see, especially young people coming out of college, where maybe it's their second job, where they're just trying to get in the door. The tech world right now is brutal. We all lived through the spring and the summer. That was really, really tough. You're going to get a lot of people who come in and they're going to give up way too much because they're just trying to get through the door. Be that person that says, listen, I get it, but I'm reading what you say you can do, and we've done some things to say that prove what you can do. Be the person that steps up and say, you're actually worth more, and I'm going to tell you that, and I'm going to show you that. And then also, and this is a little bit, and people who worked for me know this as well, I will tell you what my salary is. And I take that lead in my team because I believe in transparency. The only people that are helped by not talking about salaries are the companies. So in my teams, I've sat them in a room and said, I will tell you what I make. And I'm going to tell you what I make because when you're ready, I'm not going to push it on you, but when you're ready, you guys should talk about what you make. And if you're mad, come and talk to me because I made the decision and I can tell you about it. But like, lead with that transparency. But if you're going to go into that management track, start creating that space and that expectation of the leaders around you that if no one else is doing it, I'm going to make everyone uncomfortable because I'm going to do it. Because that's the integrity I hold in my job as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know we're right at 7. I'm going to wrap up one last question here, and then we'll go to audience Q&A, resume reviews, and everyone can get some more drinks. I just want to focus last for just briefly on the what's next question that many people see as the inevitable conclusion to a tenure in consulting. Actually, it was Anita who gave me the great advice when I was terrified to make the jump. I was like, what do I do here? She told me so many people go into consulting to find their next career, right? You experience an industry you might not have otherwise experienced, and then you jump back to that industry, right? There's this sort of mid-range in consulting, and then you eventually jump. So several of our panelists have had experience with transition, as they've mentioned, in and out of industry roles. And I just want to take a brief minute to wrap up here and go to Cristy, who I think has done sort of the several pieces of that. Like, why did you make a move into the industry roles that you did? What did that exit path look like? And was the comp equivalent, or did you trade, right, comp for work-life balance? And just sort of what does that potential end state look like if you don't want to stay in consulting long-term?
One of my first transitions was exactly, I needed to get myself off the road, right? And I was traveling too much. There was excessive burnout. There was, personal things that I wanted to take care of. So I decided that it was time for me to hang up the suitcase for a little bit, really get to know my apartment a little bit better and my community, and, stop memorizing airport codes. But it was a big transition. For me, I was lucky because the company that I went into, one of the leaders that had known me for the work that I did in consultancy, said, guess what? We reorganized, we have this need, you have the background and the experience, and we want you to join as an employee. So what's valuable about consulting and the experiences that you're going to gain in consultancy is that no one problem is going to be the same problem that you solve over and over again. Because every client is somewhat different, and every problem that you're going to solve, you're going to learn new things, new skills, and that makes you that much more valuable, right? Because you're not trying to do, pound the same nail and trying to expect different results. You're going to be a critical thinker. You're going to be a thought leader. You're going to be a team developer. You're going to have, all these skills. And that's what makes you valuable. And so I brought those skills into the industry and, hopefully I've added, benefit. Then I decided to go back to consulting because I'm just a glutton for punishment. It comes with a different mindset. I'm never satisfied doing the same thing over and over again. And what I'm delighted about consultancy, what I find joy is that, like I said, you're not trying to solve for the same problem over again. You're always innovating. You always have to think differently. There's new technology, right? There's new things that will always come and surface in the business world that will make you want to tackle things differently. And I think you've heard every one of us in our intro talk about problem solving. And that's what, if you have a knack for problem solving, consultancy could give you that entry point and give you that satisfaction of doing something that's going to be valuable, something that, that somebody may even pay for, and all the better, right? So for me, it was that I bounced around because I never want to be stagnant. I know in my next career, I'm sure, if I go back to industry, I will bring all of this other, entrepreneur experience of trying to, grow a practice, grow, teams and salary negotiations. I got to ask for that next time. Note to self, 20% more. So, there's just wonderful things about it. So you can go into industry and come back. You can go back and come back, just like I did. Bouncy balls.
Yeah.
I wanted to add to that.
Yeah.
I love what she said, right? I made a choice. I was in consulting, and like she said, you learn so much from different industry. By the time I switched to a non-consulting, I had done American Honda Motors, Chase Manhattan. Imagine the different verticals, to a state of Maine, child and health services. So different verticals, right? After that, I made a choice to go for a non-consulting because I was pregnant with my second kid and my husband was a road warrior doing exactly that, Sunday through Thursday type of a thing. So I took a backseat. But through that was still a rewarding career for me because I learned that's where I grew. My career propelled. I had a mentor, sponsor. I know we're trying to wrap it up. So,
No,
but
you're
from there, I came back into consulting. Not that I chose to, but it just so happened that I came here and I've enjoyed. And the best thing about consulting as a wrap up is that if you're a person who loves change, there can be nothing better than consulting because one day is not the same as other, especially as you grow through this thing. You have to be able to switch your mind to what was I talking to about this client with this vertical, which is so different to the other vertical, which we are talking totally different things. But your skill, the core skill that you bring to the table, that is not changing. If I am pro at data analytics is data analytics, whether it's an automobile industry to clinical research to mortgage industry, it's still the same. You still bring that. But you are happy, at least a person like me is very happy that I have that change and I don't have to switch jobs to experience that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So with that, we're going to transition real quick into a brief audience Q&A before we jump into networking and resume reviews and all that. But I just want to take a minute before we do the Q&A to thank our panelists for participating. This was a fabulous conversation, and I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. So yeah, and I think Emma's got the mic. So if anyone has questions for our panelists or for anyone up here.
I have the mic. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. I think it made me reflect on my career a lot, which is great. And I do thank you for all the changes you've made because, to be honest, I've experienced everything that you mentioned and it's a little frustrating. And now I'm thinking like, recently I've been like, well, how do I change my field for others? Excuse me. So I think what I'm seeking for is more like additional advice on some of the things that you've mentioned, more on imposter syndrome, because I've dealt with it my whole life. I'm a first generation student, first in my family to attend a university. And then to add on to that, just to make it even more special, the last 2 years I found out I had a cancerous brain tumor. So that just added on to my career in a way that I didn't expect. So, I'm 28, I'm a business consultant right now. And I was finally getting to a place where I'm like, okay, I want to take on this role to learn more public speaking and be assertive in myself after such a background of not doing so. I was so shy. And now what I'm dealing with at my job, I'm the only female in my position. I'm the youngest one as well. And it's extremely frustrating sometimes because I am playing that female role. I'm smiling and I was always happy when I first joined the company because I didn't know how to bring to her at that time. Then 3 months later, it's like, bam, surprise, surprise. And I'm totally fine. I'm great. But every like 3 months, I have to go to like these 5-hour hospital exams where I'm like in an MRI machine. And then I'm running to make a meeting at the hospital 30 minutes after that, and then getting blood work, et cetera, right? I have some coworkers after 2 years that have made comments that are like, oh, well, you've been sick for 2 years. I'm starting to think you're faking it, because my manager's great. Like, they understand, they've been supportive, and they know that they're flexible with my schedule. But now I can't stop like thinking that these comments are influencing like my coworkers around me. And to some degree, because now I have a new manager, my manager, because I've asked for opportunities, because this is why I'm here. I'm trying to transition to a more technical role. And I feel like those opportunities aren't really given to me because of all these technicalities where like I have to have a little bit more flexibility. But like I've shown like I can deliver, like no matter what, I will be on a call at 8 p.m. to accommodate like the time that I'm in the hospital or whatever. So now it's more like, how do I prove to myself, not even others, that like, you know, I am working hard. I don't have to make up for anything and work like 30 hours more.
Yep.
Just because I went to like a hospital appointment that is needed.
Absolutely. No, I think just to jump in, and then if there's anyone who has something on the imposter syndrome front, right? This was something that I struggled with a lot. Going after those tech certs yourself, if you're trying to transition into a technical role, is the first thing I would say, because you prove it to yourself and then you prove it to the other people, and it's sort of irrefutable, right? You have shown that you can do the thing. It's easy, especially if you're trying to go into that more technical role. So that would be the first thing. And like, not just online learning, general stuff, actual hard certifications. You know, often they don't cost that much. Often your employer will sponsor them if you ask in the right way. That was kind of the biggest thing for me. And the other thing in the blog, essentially, that I wrote, I had to reframe for myself what my background meant for what I was doing. And the whole takeaway of that was just, if our backgrounds can be seen as a flavor informing our approach, and not this hierarchy of this has to go to this, has to go to this, but more this flavor is going to lead to this type of outcome for the same, you know, range of roles. I feel like you got to just say it to yourself enough times until you believe it, and then other people might. And I don't know.
I want to say I can somewhat relate to what you're talking about. I'll give you a story. So when I switched to this non-consulting job, day one, first of all, my manager was not very happy because day one I showed up 5 months pregnant, which I didn't tell them that I was interviewing. So surprise, surprise, right? Baby bump. She was not happy, and she was a very tough manager to start out with. But I also had a 3.5-year-old daughter. Day one, I am in the emergency room with my older daughter, right? And how could I call in the second day saying there was no concept of remote working? And what are you going to say that on day two, I'll work remotely? No, I have to take time off, right? And it so happened that my 3.5-year-old was on her cycle of ear infections every 3 weeks. And I would get a call from the daycare. Like I said, my husband was traveling. So I would get a call from the daycare. And I remember crying, driving from work to go pick her up. Not because I'm that good mom who's feeling bad for my daughter, but it was more embarrassing for me holding a new job. And I felt like that manager was not very understanding. She didn't say anything rude, but I just felt like she was not empathetic towards me. Long story short, over a period of time, she was my best mentor and sponsor. And because of her, I am here. I can say my career growth. It turned out we are best of friends. Even after I left that job, we are best of friends. But what I was going to say, a couple of things. First, finding that manager who is very, very supportive is very important. Second is believe in yourself. Don't let anybody tell you that you're not doing good enough. And third, you talk about imposter syndrome. I think it comes very hard to women when you look at a job description. We go, oh my God, I don't have 5 out of the 10 skills listed. Men look at it and say, I have 15 more than what is listed, right? So that's typical. But you have to tell yourself, even I do that now, but I have to remind, there's one voice that tells me, oh my God, I'm still not ready for that. And then there's another voice that tells me, Anil, I'm not looking for a job, just telling you.
It's her boss.
But that's my boss sitting right there. So we can't talk about looking at job posts, but I'm generally speaking.
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically, if I was looking at it. So that is normal, but you have to train your other voice telling you that no, every job that is posted is for that unicorn candidate who has all those skills, but you can still do it and apply. What's the worst that's going to happen? Apply and you'll get rejected. If you get rejected 80% of the time, lean in on the 20%. If you don't even apply, there's no chance of that 20%.
So really quick, one, AWS has great technical certifications, so just those are awesome. But also, this is a two-way street, right? And one of the things that I talk to people that I'm mentoring about, when you're in an interview, that's not just a company interviewing you. Get into the mindset that you're interviewing the company, right? I've gone through a lot of leaders. And I was looking for the right fit. I was looking for the company that fit me well. And I'll be totally pragmatic. As you go through your career and you build that portfolio, you have more latitude to make those demands. But don't think that this is a one-way street. Don't think that, oh, I should give them whatever they want or give up whatever they want for me to be in the room with them. You're bringing something to the table. They're hiring you for a reason. And make sure that you think about that really seriously. When you get into an interview situation, that's a two-way street. You should be actively interviewing for fit for you as well, not just the other way around.
I'm going to say something, I promise.
No,
this will be
you're
quick.
good.
So about imposter syndrome, I'm also working with a coach on certain things. We all know our strengths. We all know our weaknesses. One of the exercises that we did where I sent her, my resume and my this and all my credentials, and she wrote out my bio. I read what she wrote about me and I was like, oh my God, like, I sound great. You tend to lose sight of it. And I'm saying that because your story, what you shared, you've overcome so many things. And in specifically, in a 2-year period of time, I see you as someone who came from a different background and you attacked things that might have been hurdles and you overcame all the stuff and then boom, something else got thrown in your way and you defeated that too. So I hear your story and I don't know your skill set. I don't know all the details, but like any company would be lucky to have you because you can balance a crisis and also perform. So feel good about yourself.
That makes me feel cool. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh.
No worries.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Yes.
In the back.
Oh, also, yes, right before I get to you, we are starting to do resume reviews. So if you are a resume reviewer, please head to the registration desk. That's where the reviews will be taking place. And then Pete will come find you based on the list that we have. Thank you, Pete.
You guys can wait. We have enough.
All right. If you could call that. All right. Coming to you next.
Yep. And people should feel free to get food and drinks throughout
Yes,
as we
help
do
yourself to
questions.
food and drinks while this Q&A continues.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Claudia, and thank you for all the speakers. I think this speak was really open mind because I have always working in marketing, but I was like the client. So seeing a different perspective, for example, when I used to work with agencies, so I think it was really revealing also about your experiences. So I have this question going more in the perspective of a consultant. What happens if you have, this really big client, but well, you see that the dynamic is not working. You see that this client maybe is not respecting your boundaries or limitations. So how do you approach that? Like, how do you tell? Of course, you can tell the client, okay, this is over. But how do you wanna tell your boss, yeah, we are losing this big client?
Yeah. having the hard conversations is never fun. Anybody have?
Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, well,
I'll follow.
so I think the key thing anytime you miss the mark, and you're gonna miss the mark because, humans, right? We're messy, we're temperamental. The key thing when you're going through something like that is taking time to understand why it's happening, right? You went in with an intent and you're not getting the result. So something was broken in your plan or your preparation. So I think everybody at this table will eventually lose a client or lose a partial part of your relationship. The critical thing to be successful through that is understanding why. So there's a thing I teach, kids that I work with around critical thinking. It's the what, so what, now what, right? What happened? Why does it matter? What do we do next? So making sure while you're handling that, if it's out of your hands already and you're not able to pull it back, being able to dive deep and understand why it happened and how you can make it better and less probable next time is critical. But then there's also probably a lot of things you can do in the heat of the moment, but that's very situationally specific.
I think another thing, just to speak to this, that was really great strategy pieces. I think the other thing that sometimes can like de-escalate a situation is just like, hey, we're on the same team here. Like, I'm trying to get a really great end result for you. I'm hearing we missed the mark. Let's talk about what it is. So we're not gonna like, if it's emotional, how do I redirect it into a practical space? Or hey, maybe this isn't the time. Like, we're gonna hear you out, and then we're gonna follow up with a time to really kind of get to work. I always try to kind of pull it from just an emotional space to what's the next steps, because it's proving out, hey, we're hearing you. There's something going on here that's not quite right. Let's figure out, let's triage, and let's get it back on course. This is a part of the journey because feedback is core and key for success overarchingly. So awesome. So glad you're being transparent with me about this. Let's keep talking about it.
Yeah, I wanted to add that it does happen for many reasons. First of all, as consultants, when we go in, sometimes it happens because the other side is feeling threatened. Are we being brought in to say something the executives want to hear? Are we being brought in because somebody is not capable of doing something? So first job as consultants, especially on the technical side when we are brought in, is to assure them that we are not replacing them. We are not undermining their efforts. We are part of the same team, like they both said. We are part of the same team trying to achieve the same goal. We are additional help is what we need to help them understand. Second thing I would say is we have run into those situations where we have clients who approach things, the dynamic is different. Let's just mildly put it that the dynamics are different, right? And it's important to catch yourself and not react at the moment, right? Like for example, my policy, I never write an email when I'm upset about something. If you want, dump your thoughts, vent, leave it in a draft mode, step away. Right? So to pull it back, sometimes it's possible, like they said, to reset, to have that open conversation. But it's all situational. It all depends on the client. Each client's communication style is very different. Sometimes the client comes in thinking, I know everything. What do you know about it that you're going to tell me differently? Sometimes the client comes in thinking, oh, okay, you've been brought in because they don't want to hear what I have to say. My company doesn't want to. So there are different aspects to it. You have to gauge what they're looking at and align with them, become their partner. Sometimes it's even helpful to make your idea their idea so that they feel good about it. So there are various strategies to it.
Yes, absolutely. And I think
Art of consulting.
just to not trap everyone further, I'm going to say, if we have further questions, why don't we get to the networking part? Come find us directly and
Sure.
ask us. We'll wander around if anybody has any other individual questions. But thank you guys again so much to the panelists and for everyone who attended. So yes, we have the room for quite a good bit still. So there's food in the back, there's drinks. If anyone needs anything else or you are ready for the resume reviews, they'll come get you. And go ahead, Emma.
Yep, there are 3 open spots for resume reviews right now. On the top of my list, I have Erin, Margot, and Miss Goyal. So if you want to head back to the registration table, that's where we're doing the resume reviews.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Cleartelligence.
Yeah. Go eat. Good job, you guys. I figured I would. I know I skipped. No, it's good. I feel like we talked about the diversity and the communication in a bunch of other conversations. So I love jumping those and.
We have some different perspectives and stuff here. So.
I want to misread, so I don't like there are multiple questions.
Why don't you just go on the right? Yes, and you guys should go get drinks too. You should have your things, but if you don't have tickets, oh, I get you tickets. Hold on. If you don't have them, I'll get them. Hold on.
I got a little chilly up here. Were you okay?
Yeah. Where is my friend? There we go. Oh, thank you.